In the 1940s, millions of American homes learned to sound normal while the war reached into every room. A wife might stand in a warm kitchen, pull a curtain at dusk, listen to a radio bulletin, or fold a letter with hands that did not shake until no one was watching. These were not battlefield stories, and that is why many of them went untold. They happened in kitchens, parlors, train stations, churches, bathrooms, and darkened movie theaters. They were made of ration books, service flags, blank envelopes, small coins, and ordinary objects left exactly where a husband had put them. This is not a list of tricks or advice. It is a look at the private burdens many wives of World War II soldiers carried quietly, often with pride, often with fear, and almost never with permission to say how heavy it felt. Number 1. She learned to eat last without saying it. In many wartime kitchens, the arithmetic happened before anyone sat down. A wife looked at the ration book, the cans on the shelf, and the empty plate at the end of the table, then made a decision she rarely announced. Children got the better piece. A visiting relative got a full serving. The man overseas heard in her letters that everyone was eating just fine. What she did not say was that she had turned appetite into a private household duty, one quiet plate at a time. What made it hard was how ordinary it looked. No one watching from the doorway would necessarily know she had shortened her own meal. Wartime sacrifice often hid inside good manners, inside the quick movement of a hand passing a plate to someone else first. Number 2. She grew a garden to prove she was still providing. Victory gardens were patriotic, but they were also personal. A woman kneeling in the dirt could tell herself the house had not become helpless just because a uniform had left it. Beans, carrots, onions, and tomatoes became a form of steadiness. The garden gave her something to measure when the war offered only waiting. It was not a lesson she preached. It was a row of vegetables, a basket by the fence, and proof that dinner could still come from her own hands. The garden also gave her privacy. Out among the rows, she could worry without being overheard. Neighbors saw patriotism and industry. She felt the steadier comfort of doing one task that answered back with leaves, roots, and something edible. Number 3. She read the same letter until it nearly fell apart. A wartime letter could be handled like a fragile object and a lifeline at the same time. She knew the sentences by memory, but still unfolded the paper under the lamp, looking for a tone she might have missed. A joke sounded different on the 5th reading. A short line about being tired could feel heavier at midnight. She often answered with cheer because cheer traveled better through the mail. The fear stayed at the table with the cooling tea. Paper wore down because it was touched so often. Fold lines softened, corners bent. The letter became less like mail and more like a household object, moving from drawer to table to apron pocket whenever she needed his voice close. Number 4. She hid bad news from the children. Wartime mothers became skilled at changing their faces quickly. A telegram, a neighbor's whisper, or a radio bulletin might arrive before breakfast, but the children still needed toast, milk, and a normal morning. She might fold the envelope under her hand and smile across the table while her mind was somewhere else entirely. This was not dishonesty in the ordinary sense. It was shelter. She carried the first shock alone so the children could have a few more minutes of childhood. Children often remembered the breakfast, not the envelope. That was the point. A mother could not stop the war from entering the house, but for a little while she could decide which room it reached first and who had to carry it. Number 5. She practiced widowhood before she was a widow. The empty chair taught its own routine. She learned how the room sounded without his cough, his shoes, or the small complaints that once filled the evening. A service flag in the window could mean pride, but inside the house it also meant rehearsal. She imagined what Bill's would look like if he never returned. She imagined how to speak his name without breaking. None of this was said out loud because saying it felt like tempting fate. She might still set the room as if he could walk in. That was not denial so much as discipline. The chair stayed ready because readiness felt more bearable than finality, and because hope sometimes needed furniture to hold on to. Number 6. She stretched one paycheck across a whole month. Money did not stretch because someone wrote a clever budget. It stretched because she chose what could wait, what could be mended, and what could disappear from the shopping list. Coins on the table were not just coins. They were milk, coal, shoe leather, stamps, and maybe a birthday candle if there was enough left. She often told her husband not to worry about home. The ledger told a quieter, harder version of the truth. The hardest part of budgeting was not subtraction. It was deciding which worry deserved attention today and which one could be postponed until next week. A good month meant no one else noticed how narrow the choices had become. Number 7. She smiled at the train station and broke down at home. The goodbye itself had an audience: porters, families, soldiers, and smoke from the platform. She tried to give him the face he needed to carry with him. A brave smile could feel like part of the uniform. Only later, back in the hallway, did the performance end. The house was suddenly too still. Her gloves might still be in her hand. The word she had held back at the station finally had nowhere else to go. At the station, she gave him courage, as if packing one more thing into his bag. At home, there was no one left to perform for. The silence after departure could feel louder than the train itself. Number 8. She saved soap slivers like they were money. Small things grew important when the war trained households to waste nothing. A thin curl of soap at the bottom of the basin could be pressed into the next piece, saved in a dish, or used for laundry. It was not quaint to her. It was practical, almost automatic. These little economies rarely made it into letters because they sounded too small beside battles and maps. But the home front was built from such small refusals to throw things away. Saving scraps was not a charming habit to her generation. It was a reflex built by scarcity and sharpened by war. A soap sliver, a string, a jar, a paper bag. Each small thing represented one less purchase later. Number 9. She worked a job nobody expected her to keep. Some wives entered factories, offices, depots, or workshops because the country needed labor and the household needed money. The work could bring pride and suspicion at the same time. A woman could rivet aircraft parts by day and still be expected to keep dinner, laundry, and letters moving by night. She did not always describe the exhaustion. She knew some people praised women workers in posters, then judged them in conversation. So she kept her head down and did the shift. Factory work could give a woman new confidence and new judgment from others at the same time. She was praised as necessary, then reminded that the home still belonged to her. Many carried both expectations without being allowed to complain about either. Number 10. She feared every knock at the door. A knock could be a neighbor, a delivery, or someone from the government with news no family wanted. Many women learned the sound of the front steps too well. The hallway lamp, the mail slot, the shape beyond the glass, all of it could turn ordinary in 1 second and terrifying in the next. She might pause before opening, smoothing her dress, as if that would make her ready. Bravery sometimes meant touching the doorknob while already afraid. The fear of the knock did not require bad news to arrive. Anticipation did enough damage on its own. Once a woman imagined the message, every ordinary sound at the door had to prove itself harmless. Number 11. She rehearsed what she would say if he came home changed. Long before the word trauma was common in living rooms, wives understood that war might return a different man. She studied his photograph and imagined the first evening home. Would he want silence, or questions, or simply a clean shirt and no fuss? She might practice a sentence in the mirror, then reject it for sounding too cheerful or too frightened. The rehearsal was private because no one wanted to admit that reunion could be frightening too. Reunion was supposed to be the reward for waiting, but wives knew people did not return from war unchanged by command. She practiced gentleness in advance, hoping that if the moment came, love would know what to do before words did. Number 12. She learned to make the house disappear at night. Blackout habits turned comfort into discipline. Curtains closed early, lamps stayed low. Windows became something to manage, not simply look through. Even far from the front, the ritual reminded families that the war had entered the house. For a wife alone, pulling the curtains could feel like tucking the whole home out of sight. She did it because she was told to, and because routine gave shape to fear. The room became smaller, warmer, and more hidden. Blackout routines made the house feel obedient. Curtains, lamps, and windows became part of the war effort. For women alone at night, the ritual could be calming and frightening at once. Protection performed in a room that still felt exposed. Number 13. She kept his razor right where he left it. Some objects were too ordinary to move and too painful to touch. A razor by the sink, a shaving brush, a folded towel, each could hold the shape of a morning before the war. Moving them might feel like accepting too much. Dusting around them could become a small act of loyalty. Guests might not notice, children might not understand. But she knew exactly why the sink looked the same. It was a room waiting for a man to return. Leaving his things untouched could become a private calendar. Each morning, the razor remained there, and each morning he was still away. The object did nothing, yet it marked time more sharply than a date on paper. Number 14. She pretended the radio did not scare her. The radio brought music, sermons, baseball, and then suddenly the war. A calm voice could make a living room colder than any storm. She might knit while listening, because moving her hands helped her keep still. When frightening news came through, she did not always turn it off. Information felt necessary, even when it hurt. If children were nearby, she measured her face. If she was alone, she listened harder, hoping not to hear a place name connected to him. The radio asked her to be informed and composed at the same time. She could not unknow what she heard, but she also could not let every bulletin rule the household. So she listened, worked her hands, and kept breathing. Number 15. She learned which neighbors could be trusted. War made privacy difficult. People noticed curtains, mail, uniforms, factory shifts, and who cried after church. A good neighbor might bring a casserole without asking questions. A careless one might turn private fear into porch gossip. Wives learned the difference quickly. Trust was built in small deliveries, lowered voices, and the kindness of not demanding a story. Sometimes the most merciful thing another woman offered was food at the door and the dignity of leaving before tears started. Trust during wartime was practical. The right neighbor could watch children, bring food, or simply avoid asking the question everyone knew was painful. In many streets, survival depended less on speeches than on these quiet agreements between women. Number 16. She made a celebration meal from almost nothing. Birthdays, anniversaries, and home front holidays did not stop because the pantry was thin. A small cake, one candle, or a carefully saved ingredient could carry a whole family's attempt at normal life. The meal might look plain, but the planning behind it was not. She had counted coupons, stretched sugar, and decided what would be missing without announcing it. Celebration became less about abundance and more about refusing to let war take every corner of the table. A small celebration meal carried defiance. It said the family still had dates worth marking and people worth gathering around. The cake did not have to be large to hold that meaning. Sometimes the single candle did most of the work. Number 17. She feared which star she would have to hang next. A blue star in the window marked service. A gold star nearby marked a loss that everyone understood without words. Women saw those windows. They knew which houses had changed. Looking across the street could feel like looking at a possible future. She might be proud of the blue star and terrified of what it could become. This was one of the fears rarely put into letters, because no wife wanted to send dread across the ocean. The service flag was public, but the fear around it was not. A woman could stand proudly beneath the blue star while quietly measuring the distance to another window, another family, another possible version of the same war. Number 18. She counted the days without marking them publicly. Calendars could become dangerous objects for the heart. Marking every day made the waiting visible, and sometimes she did not want the children, neighbors, or even herself to see how closely she was counting. She knew the dates anyway. Paydays, mail days, anniversaries, and the last morning at the station lived in her head. A pencil near the calendar might hover and stop. The discipline was not forgetting. It was keeping longing from taking over the wall. Not marking the calendar did not make time move faster. It only kept longing from becoming a display. She could count privately, in chores and mail deliveries, while presenting the world with a wall that looked calm. Number 19. She watched the newsreel and prayed she would not recognize a face. Movie theaters promised escape, but wartime newsreels could turn the screen into a source of dread. The audience sat together, yet each family watched alone in its own way. A woman might grip her handbag as helmets, ships, or smoke filled the screen. She knew the chances of recognizing someone were small. Fear did not care about probability. In the glow of the theater, she looked and tried not to look at the same time. The theater made the fear communal, but not easier. Around her, people shifted in their seats and pretended to watch like citizens. Inside, she watched like a wife, searching the blur for a face she hoped never to find. Number 20. She learned to fix things he used to fix. A loose chair, a sticking drawer, a broken latch, these jobs had once belonged to him by habit more than rule. During the war, habit changed. She opened the toolbox, guessed, tried again, and learned by necessity. The repair might be imperfect, but it stood. What she did not say was how often a simple task reminded her of absence. Tightening a screw could feel practical one moment and unbearably intimate the next. Learning repairs changed the shape of absence. The missing husband was not only missed at supper or bedtime, he was missed in the loose hinge, the broken chair, and the moment she realized no one else was coming to fix it. Number 21. She did not tell him how lonely she was. Letters from home were supposed to strengthen a soldier, not burden him, so she edited herself. She wrote about the children, the garden, the weather, the funny thing a neighbor said. She did not always write about the quiet after supper or the way the bed felt too wide. Loneliness became something she managed like ration points, measured, hidden, and spent carefully. The letter might sound cheerful. The unmailed truth stayed under the lamp. The most honest sentences were often the ones she did not mail. She may have written them and then started over. A cheerful letter could be an act of love, but it also left her with the heavier version at home. Number 22. She kept the children proud when she was afraid. Children needed a father to be brave, and often the mother had to supply that bravery for him. She pointed to the portrait, straightened a collar, or let them wave a small flag because pride was easier for a child to carry than fear. Later, when the room was quiet, the same portrait could look different to her. She had not lied to them. She had chosen the part of the truth they could bear. Children learned pride from the way she arranged the room and spoke about their father. They did not need every fear translated. She gave them the version of courage small enough for their hands to hold. Number 23. She saved every scrap of him. A button, a photograph, a letter bundle, a ticket stub, even an old envelope could become part of a private archive. The box was not clutter. It was proof that he had existed in ordinary rooms before war made him distant. She might open it on hard nights, touch one thing, then close it again before anyone saw. These scraps were too small for history books, but inside a bedroom drawer they carried the weight of a whole marriage. The keepsake box was a history no archive would request. Its objects were too domestic, too ordinary, and too private. Yet for her, those scraps preserved the man before the uniform became the first thing people mentioned. Number 24. She was expected to be brave in public. Public grief had rules. On church steps, in shops, or on the sidewalk, a wife was expected to stand straight, answer kindly, and not make others uncomfortable. A hat, gloves, and a composed face could hide a great deal. Other women often understood because they were doing the same thing. The performance was not vanity. It was survival in a community where everyone watched everyone, and where breaking down in public could become another story people repeated. Public bravery had a cost because it had to be repeated. Each greeting, each church step, each careful smile asked her to gather herself again. Other women recognized the effort even when no one named it. Number 25. She never knew which version of him would come home. The dream of reunion was simple from a distance. The door opens, he steps in, everything becomes whole. Wives knew it might not be that clean. He could come home thinner, quieter, angrier, older, or unable to explain what had happened. She could love him and still be afraid of the unknown person shaped by war. When the moment finally came, the embrace carried hope, relief, and a question neither of them could answer yet. Coming home did not end the story in one embrace. It began another kind of waiting. Waiting to learn what could be spoken, what would remain silent, and how two people would rebuild a home around what the war had changed. By the time the war ended, some husbands came home, some did not, and many homes had changed even when the furniture looked the same. The women who waited were often praised for being brave, but praise could flatten the truth. Bravery was not a single pose on a church step or a smile at a train station. It was the repeated work of holding a family together while not knowing what the next letter, knock, or radio bulletin might bring. If someone in your family kept a service flag, a box of letters, a wartime photograph, or a story that was only told late in life, there may have been more behind it than anyone said at the time. Tell us which of these quiet wartime burdens your family remembers, and subscribe so this kind of home front history is not lost. Thank you for spending this time with these quiet stories. They were ordinary rooms, ordinary objects, and ordinary women carrying an extraordinary weight.